Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I rise in strong support of this amendment. And of course, I think Mr. Schiff's suggestion to change the word support to examine or review or conduct oversight is appropriate, but certainly in setting forth our priorities for this Congress, paying particular attention to federal efforts to combat domestic violence extremism in the United States ought to be part of it. Why? Because the Attorney General of the United States and the Director of the Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security have identified racially or ethnically motivated violent extremists as the greatest threat to Americans. So this is consistent with what is happening. We've seen a significant increase in hate and anti-Semitism and white nationalism in this country and the violence that flows from it. That's what we heard from the chief law enforcement officials in our country. And I applaud Congressman Schiff for bringing forth this amendment to say, let's include this as part of our oversight. This is a comprehensive amendment. It identifies some of the worst sources of violence in this country right now: anti-AAPI hate, anti-Semitism, white nationalism. And why wouldn't we, as the American people are watching us, adopt our oversight plan for this Congress, make it clear that we intend to look at the effectiveness of federal efforts to combat this extraordinary threat to the lives and safety of the American people. This shouldn't be a Democratic or Republican disagreement. Every single person on this committee ought to welcome the opportunity to reaffirm our commitment to attack and effectively combat this scourge of violence, of white supremacist violence, of bigotry and hate that is unfortunately on the rise in this country. So I applaud Congressman Schiff. I urge my colleagues to support this amendment. I will note in my remaining couple of minutes that I am disappointed yet again, Mr. Chairman, that despite all the flourish, you apparently forgot once again to do the Pledge of Allegiance. So,
Would the gentleman yield?
Certainly, I'm happy to yield to the gentleman.
I appreciate that. So I don't know that the FBI, when they identified domestic terrorism as a significant concern in this country, limited that definition to acts of terrorism that didn't include pregnancy resource centers or acts of terrorism that didn't include Black Christian churches.
Well, actually, Mr. Buck, just reclaiming my time, what they said specifically is that the greatest domestic threat facing the United States came from what they both described as, and I quote, racially or ethnically motivated violent extremists. So I don't think actually they were making reference to healthcare clinics, et cetera. They were talking about very specifically racially or ethnically motivated violent extremists as the source of greatest danger to the lives and safety of the American people.
Would the gentleman yield again?
Of course.
I will make an offer to the sponsor of this amendment. I am willing to vote for this amendment, so I don't want to pretend that this is a friendly amendment made in bad faith. If you're willing to put a period after the word bigotry and delete the rest of that sentence, I'm willing to vote for this amendment because I believe all forms of domestic terrorism should be condemned. We should look at them. We should have oversight over agencies that look at them. But to single out, and again, my friend from North Carolina is so much more eloquent than I am. He put it very succinctly. You pick one racial group, you pick one religious group, you pick one type of bigotry against race. If you just want to actually look at domestic terrorism, I'm with you.
Will the gentleman from Rhode Island yield?
Yes, I yield.
I've already offered to the gentleman to accept a friendly amendment that adds all faiths. Please bear in mind that the language of the amendment already says including but not limited to acts of domestic terrorism motivated by all forms of bigotry. The reason that anti-AAPI hate is identified is, as we have seen both in the recent mass shootings in California and elsewhere, but also as we have seen among our own colleagues in Congress, a stunning display of bigotry against our colleagues of Asian descent. We've got a problem here of anti-AAPI hate that exploded during the pandemic. We also have a problem exploding of anti-Semitism as documented by the ADL and as documented by the FBI. The predominant terrorist threat comes from white nationalism. It doesn't come from these other sources. So yes, we're highlighting particularly those forms of hate that are on the rise, the dramatic rise. But I'm happy to accept a friendly amendment to include all faiths, If that will earn the gentleman's support, if not, then I will decline.
Gentleman's time has expired.